Welcome. Welcome everyone. I know this is a very weird, but you all staring at the wall. Welcome to Wheeler. I just wanted to very quickly, I'm Lisa Sumption, the Director of Oregon Parks and Recreation Department and the co-convener of the Salmon Berry Trail Interagency. Cal Moto is my partner in crime on the other side, but he is not here with us today, but Mike Camerata is here and in his absence and going to help me in any way he can. And I just want to say thank you to folks from Wheeler, in particular Karen Matthews, our Wheeler City Councilor, and Cliff Kemp, our Mayor of Wheeler. Thank you for hosting us here and having us here and being with us in person. I was reminiscing, it was probably 12 or 13 years ago we were here in the city having this conversation about the place you all toured this morning as the property up there, and just looking at things, and we were having these conversations about would we ever want to do something or have a trail, and here we are a decade later and much closer than we were in those days. Isn't that right? And so with that, I just wanted to go ahead and kick off the meeting and welcome everybody. And sorry the tour was wet and then I missed you, but I'm glad that you got out there because Cougar Valley is a very beautiful place, and that part of the trail will be very special for many generations to come. So why don't we go ahead and introduce any new members or anybody? Why don't we just do introductions? Sure. As awkward as it is, but want to start off with Carolyn?
Me? Yes. I'm Caroline Fitchett. I'm the Executive Director of the Salmon Berry Trail Foundation. And I also am the administrator for the Salmon Berry Trail Intergovernmental Agency. Staff for both.
Bill Bartline, board representative on the STIA board, and I also sit on the STF board.
Erin Starr, Tillamook County Commissioner. I sit on the STIA board. I also sit on the Salmon Berry Trail Foundation board.
And I'm Michael Nunzert. I'm one of the board members for the Salmon Berry Trail Foundation. And today I'm also filling in for Allison Graves, who's on medical leave on the STIA board. So I got two hats.
Thank you.
Hello, Jerry Willard, Washington County Commissioner. I also sit on both the STIA and Foundation boards. And my district of Washington County is the western side, so I've got about 20 miles of the trail and starting in Banks and heading this direction. My staff director, Department of Forestry and the District Forester in Forest Groves. I'm more familiar with the valley side, but very glad to be on the coast today. For break of tradition, I'm gonna sit on the other side. I can see everybody and I can turn to the side. So. Oh my God, the camera. Good.
Yeah, you want to introduce yourself? No, you're good. Kevin's over there making problems.
I'm Mary McGinnis, and I'm on the city council at Rockaway Beach, and we have really dug in to our section of the trail.
Thank you.
I'm Charles McNeely. I'm the mayor of Rockaway Beach.
I'm Jack Thayer, Norfolk Citizen.
I'm Dennis Carr, as I live just 5 minutes
Driveway.
along the driveway. I have been attending the earlier meeting regularly, and then we kind of fell out of the loop, so I'm trying to get back into the lot.
Dennis Laviolette, that lives in the area for 30 years.
Damien Laviolette, resident and business owner along the trail.
Hi, I'm John Vogler. I live with the Salmon Berry Trail Foundation on the board.
It takes all of our wonderful minutes. Thank you.
Gary Bond, live in Tillamook and interested in the trail.
Dan Ragnall, I'm the city councilor in Wheeler.
Mary Matthews, prisoner of the Wheeler City Council, and like to welcome all of you. It's great to see so many different groups represented.
Thanks for having us.
Sam Aldridge, I'm the superintendent of Oregon City Railroad.
Laviolette, local citizen.
John Hamill, I live on the edge of the coastal trail on the other side of the hill. Cliff Kemp, mayor of Wheeler.
Christine Hayden, I'm a city council member for Rockaway Beach. I'm the president of the Rockaway Beach Chamber of Commerce.
Chat from Lee, Facebook, and Red Magazine.
And one more.
Hi, welcome. We can do an introduction.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris.
Hi, Chris. Welcome. Okay. And are there any, before we get going, are there any changes to the agenda? Does everyone have a chance to review it? They're good, no proposed changes, alterations? Okay. And then let's go ahead and look for a thumbs up to approve the minutes. Okay, all thumbs up. Okay, minutes are approved. And
Are there any more agendas?
yes, we can, okay. Thank you, Karen.
And do we have people online with us that we should be recognizing or acknowledging?
We do, it looks like we do here have a couple of people, so I don't know how easy, before I do that, Gavin, is it easy for folks to introduce themselves online? Or we can speak, but you can get it. Okay, so it looks like we have, oh boy. Bill Jablonski
From ODOT?
from ODOT,
Yeah.
Jared Collier from Parks, and I think that's it. Okay. Hopefully everybody can hear us well online, and I don't know about seeing us, but at least you can hear us, that's the most important part. So the next part of the agenda is Mike is gonna go ahead and do just a little STIA history. I think it's always a good reminder every time that we're together to go through the history and remind us where we've been and kind of where we're going and each other. Stay along the trail as we should be, so Mike, if I could.
Yeah. Well, the agenda, but love to get a little bit.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
I will help. People all have it back on.
So, in the beginning, it was nothing. And then there was a railroad, right, and that was heavily used by Philadelphia County as a transportation corridor back and forth with the valley of the coast. Really important part of the community. I was talking to Damien here about the pre-railroad era and shipping logs up the coast and the house there, it was a part of that, the railroad came in. The railroad was a really important part of the community until 2007, well, until 1996 with a big storm, wiped out the rail line, very expensive, put back into place, and then blew out again in 2007. And at that point, the decision was not to rebuild the railroad. And so that, you know, I kind of thumbs up the bill here. I'm not a Philadelphia resident myself, but so the community said, can we make this a recreational trail? And I believe that was Philadelphia County, Fort working together and invited state parks, invited Oregon Department of Forestry, the landowner along a large section of the interior canyon. If they're interested in building a trail. And so there was a meeting there in the mine saying, yeah, we could think about it. There was some public meetings asking about it. And at some point, Cycle Oregon gave $100,000 to do a concept plan of what would it look like. And so you've seen that glossy document called the concept plan. They actually walked the whole line very briefly. So it was $100,000 seems like a lot of money, but we're talking about 86 miles of 4 roads. It was a flyby. It's really what it was. And there was a public meeting at that point to say, is there enough here to move forward? Like, you know, everybody who wanted to come kind of stood in the circle, and it was called a coalition. People were interested in the trail. And there was a moment there where they gave a thumbs up. Yep, this is exciting. We think this could work. No one knew how much it would cost. Somebody swagged $44 million. And that was kind of somebody said it was like the triathlon version. It was a run, walk, and swim version from the coast to the valley because the bridges that we built anyway. So that was, I forget the year, probably about 2013 maybe was that. It was Tim Woods and Doug Decker.
12 or 13, somewhere in there. Tim and Doug.
And so that thumbs up kind of really got things started. And one of the real important things to remember from that time was why. And the concept plan with public meetings buying into that gave 4 goals. And I think those are still should be our guiding light today, unless we have a public meeting and meeting of the minds to change them. But those are support local economies. Those are preserve the investment in the rail line. You know, that's a really, you know, it's a really unique 86-mile piece of property that connects with all those coast. If that goes away, that goes away. You'll never get it back. So that was a key goal. Another key goal there was access for everyone. From an equity standpoint, this is not just for the totally physically fit 22-year-olds. This is for all of us. And so we're trying to preserve access or support access for everybody. And the last one is for the environment, it's preserve the environment. There was an idea then, and still is today, that rail line with all the ties in it and rail crossings have a detriment on that wild salmon market. And so preserving the environment is a key goal of this, to do a better job around that. So, a lot of public work there to get to that moment. And so those are the guiding principles, and they're in the concept plan. And now the group saying, yes, we think it's worth it. So Tillamook County, Fort Tillamook Bay, state parks, and Oregon Department of Forestry were the kind of the main drivers in there. And this went on for a while with a coalition of working on this. I remember somebody finally gave some money to ask, should we call it the Salmonberry Trail? Or is there a better name? And we hired this group, Human, I think they were called, and they did all this work. I'm sure it was really great work, and they had all these great names. And they say it was going to be called the Grave. They told us that a name had to work internationally, it had to work nationally, it had to work locally, it had to speak to people. And at some point, someone had to make a decision. We realized we have to have a better decision-making body for this. Nothing else, just to come up with a name, but also because you need to make decisions. And in the end, the naming, to finish that story, it kind of fell apart. We all called the Salmonberry Trail. And so despite all the consultants, we ended up with the Salmonberry Trail, which I think is a great name, or great. But so part of that, we have to have better decision making. We have the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust as the financial arm to take in money and disperse it out. But we had to have better decision making. And working with Oregon Solutions, we used a 190 agreement to come up with a Salmonberry Trail intergovernmental agency. And that is the decision making body. And at first it was state parks, Oregon Department of Forestry, Fort Tillamook Bay, and Tillamook County. And under Jerry Willie's leadership, we added Washington County later. So it's really the 5. And then added a bunch of ex officio members that are here at the table to help us make good decisions. And the idea is that it's really collaborative. We want this to work for everybody. If it did come down to a vote, those are the 5 voting members, but we don't want it to come down to a vote. We want everybody in the room to think this is the right pathway. A couple more important pieces before I turn it over. The segment plans. So the concept plan was $100,000 flyby. The next level, maybe the 30,000 feet. Those are the segment plans. Public groups came together to advise state parks. We had different conveners of the different segments, but very public process. Come up with what should the trail look like. And I remember the canyon section pretty dramatically. I was one of the co-conveners, and we had people on that very diverse committee. We worked really hard to have a diverse group of Oregonians contributing. And John Hamill was on that committee. Thank you, John, for taking part as a local landowner. So we wanted the local landowners to contribute to making that successful, and we went through the local landscape of Washington County. What I really remember about some of that though was the mobility challenge group and the environmental side. So the environmental community wants the minimum trail possible to get through the canyon because they want to have the minimum impact on the canyon. But mobility challenge folks are saying, yeah, that's great, but we want to be able to visit there too. And so there was a lot of tension there. The group worked hard together. And what's in that segment plan is that agreement struck in a public way around that section. There's no campgrounds in that section. That's a nod to the environment. Because campers, after they set up their tent, they go fishing and they go swimming and they catch salmon fry, right? We don't want that. And we'd rather people got through the canyon. That's an example. And you also see there that the mobility challenge for both sections coming into the canyon, there's some flat ground. And they work hard to make that vision to be accessible. As you get farther into the canyon, accessibility goes down. But still work on a crossing recommendation in there to be as mobility friendly as possible. So that's the kind of thing that was worked out with segment plans. There's still a guiding document for it. Then pandemic hit. The world fell apart. I think public attention went on many other important things besides today. At some point, we stood up a San Andreas Trail Foundation. That's the last important piece I will mention. Public Forest Heritage Trust was a financial arm, was really important for a while. To get major grants, we had to go to a 501c3 nonprofit, which is a different setup than what this Public Forest Heritage Trust was. So we worked together to stand up the San Andreas Trail Foundation. Caroline Fitch is our executive director. I appreciate that. Tullanuck County, Washington County, for funding has come from a whole variety of important places, but it's a really important nonprofit arm and have an agreement with STIA about what they do for STIA. So, all right, that's the nutshell if I think of it, but Lisa, why don't you back clean up to start with?
No, I've looked to others. Bill probably has been sitting at the table the longest, so.
Thank you, Rail Bank, Bill.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just going back in the history, watching Doug and Tim and then coming to the table, and now it's been a good 12 years that I've been sitting at the table and just thinking about, all the progress that's been made and the early conversations of should it be a trail, should it be a trail, should we rail bank, shouldn't we rail bank? And just the collaboration, because there has been, it has been very contentious, it's been very challenging at times, but it has been really amazingly awesome to come together to have the dialogue about like, what does this mean long term? And what would that look like? And having that rail bank piece was incredible. It was the best blessing I think we could have given to the future, whether that, anything happens with this trail in the immediate future, being able to have that preserved and protected, to be able to do something different over time as the finances come in and the community is engaged and ready and receptive. I think that's been the bigger overarching goal is let's take our time here, because that $100,000 back in 2007 or 9 was a lot of money. It was a big deal when that money came in for us to be able to do that. And I know that the 30 million or whatever in the current plan seems like a lot of money, but it's probably twice that compared to where, in today's market. So, I mean, that's only going to continue to be a thing, and just kind of reflecting on where we were and where we've been, and being able to have STF stand up and be able to be more of that fundraising arm to be able to help us figure out how to operationalize the plan has been a phenomenal change. And feel free, Bill, or others have been around for a long time. Throw anything else you feels important.
I just think that we built the foundation. And the foundation is strong enough, I think that will survive at least my lifetime and probably, hopefully 100 years out. And that foundation is there. Now it's time to start
Building
with STF. And as I've said probably for the last 10 years, let's get a little stretch done, because we can build off of that and get more donations. So, and I'm really pleased where STF is taking us at this point. I think it's phenomenal what's been accomplished in just the last year. It's just mind blowing and beyond. So kudos to everybody involved. It's been a fun ride.
Yeah, there's been some interesting intersections along the journey, but it has been really fun to get to where we are today. And once that first segment is done, it'll just become contagious. So I'm just super excited that we have the partnership and support that we do in the room continuously. So.
And that foundation, just to mention what that is, linear piece of property owned by the Port of Tillamook Bay under rail bank, the federal rail banking process, so it's preserved as a recreational trail in case it ever has to back to the rail line. And then STIA has a lease with the Port of Tillamook Bay to use it as a recreational trail. So I think that's you say a foundation, I think that's sort of a physical part of it, which took a long time. It's kind of like a little bit, like three sentences.
Years.
Just the lease alone with the port, I think took 2 or 3 years, and those are intense meetings.
And the rail banking, all of it.
Yeah.
We're in a great place. So Caroline, I hope that was what you're looking for. Okay. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Caroline just to give a Salmon Berry Trail Foundation report at the top of where you are, what you're doing.
Yeah. So again, my name is Caroline Fitchett. Nice to see everyone here, and really nice to see some new faces and also folks that I know have been involved in this process for a really long time. So I've been here for about 7 months, and I'm just going to give a brief update of what we've been up to since the last STIA meeting, which was in May, and that was held at the Pinnock Mansion. First and foremost, I want to give kudos to Gavin, who's come on full time. Hi, Gavin. And also, so Gavin does all of our communications and is our development director. He also helps with all of our technology. So thank you, Gavin, for all that. And Sharon Adair, who many of you met, she has also recently been hired as our project manager. And so she does a lot of various things that need to be managed at the Salmonberry. The Salmonberry is a small foundation that again is focused on raising the funds that are needed to make the trail happen, and is also responsible for facilitating building the movement and the community to have input to be able to figure out how we're actually going to plan in a more detailed way and build out the trail segment by segment. In terms of that, Michael Nutzer, who you already met and is on our board, and he's the chair of the Planning and Construction Committee. One of the things that we have spent a lot of time on this last quarter is building out what's called the Technical Advisory Team. So that, and this is a team of volunteers that are experts in, could be bridge building, it could be fish scientists or biologists. They could be transportation planners, so they know how to plan and build things and how to look for challenges. And they help us as we look at a certain segment and what challenges we think we see. So that is the technical advisory team. We have also been heavily working on re-engaging volunteers, primarily in Washington County, and we hope to move to Tillamook County to help along the rail line. In Washington County in particular, there's a lot of trail clearing that is needed to be done that hasn't been done in a long time. And John Vogler will comment briefly on how much the volunteers have trails cleared along the rail line in Washington County. And in addition to that, those activities, we have also been working on fundraising. And so that means re-engaging the donors that the Salmonberry Trail Foundation have had in the past. It means hosting small events to invite not only partners, but potential private donors and foundation donors so that we as an organization can get back sort of on a sustaining ground, reminding folks in our state that care about trails and conservation and connectivity and urban-rural divides, that the Salmonberry Trail Foundation is an organization that they can also invest in. So those are kind of like the big arching areas that we've been working on. We have also hosted a number of guided hikes. So the Salmonberry Trail isn't open. Nobody should be on the Salmonberry Trail unless you're with the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad down here. But on the western side, we've done it here also in Tillamook County with Sam, who took us out on the Salmonberry Trail here in Tillamook County, hosting some our state representative from here, Representative Devati, Commissioner Starr, and Council Member Matthews all went out on a hike saying thank you very much, and Michael and myself. And we've done this also in Washington County. So between the area of Banks and Stewart State Park, we've had state representatives out there, local elected officials, staff, congressional staff, and congressional member Suzanne Bonamici, who's also, of course, the representative for Tillamook County. So we've been trying to, increase our education for folks that are in leadership levels that have the opportunity to one day fund pieces of the Salmonberry Trail and other amenities that the Salmonberry Trail might need. That again connect to the priorities that Mike mentioned. Conservation, local economies, recreation, and having all access, and remain, making sure to protect, of course, the right of way for future use one day. Well, I think that's pretty much it. We've expanded our board, so we've brought 2 more board members onto the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. Commissioner Jerry Willie is a new board member for the foundation, and Mike Bennett is also a board member for the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. And then upcoming, we're hoping to do more community meetings here in Tillamook County. And we'll continue on our guided hikes. The guided hikes, working with Sam, we might be able to do some more here in Tillamook County, and then definitely increasing guided hikes in Washington County.
Busy. Very busy since we're together. Are you in the period to talk about finance and grant updates? I don't want to surprise you since I surprised Mike, so.
Sorry, Mike.
No, the rest of you, yes, you are, so you might want to just check the agenda to see if you have an active role here.
Yeah, we're gonna quick update on the STIA finances. So we've got a budget of 51,900. And we have pledges and support that will cover that. So we're in good shape for this year. As we move along, we'll get more detailed financial reports. So the STIA board can see what we're actually spending all of the dollars for. I want to thank Oregon Parks and Oregon Department of Forestry. They've stepped up with some cash balances and in-kind support to get us to our balance plan in the budget. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'll go ahead and add a little bit to that also. Thank you, both State Parks and Department of Forestry. So in May, for the folks who are guests, in May, STIA did have a budget to help cover the administrative costs of STIA. And coming back around now, State Parks and Department of Forestry have added to that budget, which is great. So that budget is going to be whole this year. In addition, the Sandberry Trail Foundation received a $50,000 grant from Travel Oregon. This is before my time, and we spent it this year. We needed a match of $50,000. It was a planning grant. We used this grant for bridge inspections in a segment of Washington County, which cost a total of $100,000. So 50 came from Travel Oregon, 50 came from the Sandberry Trail Foundation, which part of that was from Washington County, from some funding that we received from Washington County and other donors. In addition, just looking forward, we have a construction grant that we need to use by the middle of 2025, which is for Washington County. It also requires a match, so we'll be raising funds to be able to match that dollar for dollar so that we can utilize that in Washington County. And those are the big updates. And then we have applied for numerous grants. Thank you, Gavin, this year. And there's at least 35 that are on our list to continue applying for and researching. Some of these are federal government grants, some of them are state government grants, and many of them are private grants.
Okay, thank you. And then if you might, we're ready to turn it over for planning and construction report.
Okay,
This is where we're gonna look
this
at
is,
the
yeah, so
whiteboard.
we have some good tech and some bad tech here today. One of the bad techs
The
is
sun came out.
the sun came out and it messed up our projection, but I will try to wave my arms vigorously enough that everybody can at least get the gist of what I'm talking about here. Let's see here, I need to get my slideshow going. All right, so my role as chairman of the Planning and Construction Committee is to try and figure out how to start making trail. There's a lot of constraints. I like to say that we have one of every bad thing and maybe a couple of really good things in our way between us and the trail. 82 miles of very rugged terrain and all kinds of challenges. So I'm going to start off by talking about things that are related to the entire trail, and then we'll break it down into the segments so that you can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to cover everything that's new for the past 6 months because things are really starting to move. Caroline's presence has really driven a lot of stuff. There's a lot of other things just kind of reach fruition at the same time. And so things are starting to happen. And I'd like to just bring everybody up to date on that. So I'm going to start with the bad news, and you can't quite see it there. So the original planning documents that Mike was talking about, Parametrics did 4 planning documents for the coastal segment, the river segment, canyon and valley, and they had embedded in them cost estimates. And those cost estimates covered building the trail that matched the plan documents. So in most cases, it was a 10-foot wide hard surface trail. In the canyon section, it's more of what they call a rail trail, rail bed trail. In other words, you're walking down between the rails and maybe a backcountry path you think of a hiking trail to get around obstacle. So at the time that the reports came out, that added up to $235 million, which is a very large number. But that was up to 7 years ago, one of those reports came out. So I took it upon myself to escalate those costs to $2023 as best I could. And that's the number you can't see down in the red here. It's $355 million would be the estimate to build out everything that's in those plans. So that's north of $1/3 billion. And I don't know that anybody here has that in their back pocket. So we are looking at ways to be able to start building trail or opening trail that are a lot less expensive. And one of the things that as soon as you have, whoops, that's the wrong way, here we go. As soon as you have too big of a budget, you want to start scoping down. So we scope down and scope down and scope down and scope down. And we got to a place where we're looking at opening the trail with minimum trail amenities. What can we do to open this trail that it's still a safe trail to walk on? And there are going to be things that aren't involved in that trail, but at least we can get a little bit open. So we're revising the strategy. People have discussed this a lot, which is what we're calling staging. The first stage of this trail is the minimum possible that we can get away with so we can make something happen. And it's really just an additional tool that we can use to think about things. So staging is, as I said, a minimum safe construction. The idea is we get something going, we get out there, people can enjoy it, and then as money becomes available, we upgrade that trail. And as long as we're not doing something along the way that prohibits updating it later, it probably isn't even actually going to cost us that much to kind of pave over the old trail with a new trail, so to speak. So that's kind of where we're driving to here. Staging ultimately takes us to the same place as the planning documents. If you just project out in time and money, you can still build the trail exactly as it was envisioned. So what it is not is what a lot of people would refer to as phasing. And a phase trail would be that you would build the first 5 miles to the full specifications, 10-foot wide trail, etc. And then you were done with that phase, you move to the next 5 miles and you do that and so on. And what that does is that it either creates chunks of trail that are disconnected, or you only get a starting point in, let's say, in Washington County working this direction, or in Tillamook County working the other direction. It takes a long time before you have a completed thing that you can use. So it's not phasing, it's staging. So the advantages of staging is we open some trail quickly and safely. We get the lowest possible cost to start. Very important. We get some recreation now. It builds support and enthusiasm. And we can use this concept of a very inexpensive trail to tie other sections of trail together that are being built. So again, it's more of a cohesive trail rather than a dashed line across the map. So staging, as I said, is we're recreating, we're resurrecting it, kind of turning it into a way of life. And so it's a major change or a philosophical change. And I'd like to just hear if there's any comments or questions about that phase of or that part of it.
So I just want to add to what Michael is saying. He did mention that, sort of we're re-bringing this back. STIA as an intergovernmental agency had discussions about this 8 years ago, or the group who was at the table before, because it was just very clear when you look at those financial numbers that there is not someone in Washington County or Tillamook County, to be filming, but who is going to be able to pay for that gold standard that's in the concept phase. And so looking at staging, as Michael has mentioned, where you take certain sections and you scale it down to what is affordable, what is safe for users of the trail, safe for the community around it, is how we plan to approach as we move forward in planning.
Any other comments, questions? Yeah.
And just the one thing I'd add is a, community member. Is that that's one of the probably issues that we have as landowners, because you don't have things like bathrooms, which we all know where this, is going. And things like that, people run out of, energy, where do I go, there's not the signage, there's not. All these things, I mean, I get that there's not that much.
So later in the program, we're going to talk about the minimum trail standards, and we are going to address a whole bunch of what you're referring to.
On the safety aspect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we can't just plop a trail out in the woods and hope for the best.
Right.
We understand that. Okay.
And also recognize at the same time, right, the longer you wait, it's like anything, it never gets cheaper. So I understand. We had a very robust conversation back like 8 years ago around the same thing around, do you do minimal, do you do maximum? And I get and understand, both philosophies, but at the same time, I guess you got to start somewhere with the safety concerns, with the signage, with the access pieces that are necessary. So it might be helpful to move that and bring that into the dialogue now so that it's more.
It's Mike's got it on.
Are you okay with that, Michael?
I can do it whenever. So I'll talk about the minimum trails as part of this presentation, then I can roll right into that if we want to at the end.
It might
Because
make it an easier conversation because I think those are more of the concerns.
That's
But
perfectly
I would have.
yeah, no. All right, so let's move on.
Maybe before you do my, add more piece of context.
Sure.
In 2022, we did a strategic plan for the San Marino Trail, intergovernmental agency working with STIA. And in that plan, one of the things we wanted to accomplish in the short term is this operations and maintenance agreement standards.
Yeah.
We're asking people what the trail standards are and financial implications. We're really trying to give the community a target. If Rockaway is trying to do a trail through Rockaway, they need to know what is STIA going to accept. We're trying to give them some certainty around what is the minimum. And does the minimum include bathrooms? Well, this is where that's going to get.
Access for safety.
I guess a little clarification too, I mean, Mike knows where I live, we're between Timber and Buxton. And so it's a little more remote and there's a lot more issues and concerns with our, people in our neighborhood than, here, there's a lot more going on, like, it's different.
You're roughly a Baptist stop from Timber, I think.
Okay. Another area that we're trying to find ways to move forward with is historically the model that was STIA was operating under, and certainly San Maria Trail, was to partner with a governmental entity to build a portion of the Salmonberry Trail. And that is an excellent model as long as there are partners who are willing to go forward with that sort of thing. And so we have a lot of interest here on the coast in the 5 cities or 6 cities, depending on how you add it up, in building the trail. And we have active projects going on. I'll cover some more of them with Rockaway Beach and stuff like that. We've put in requests for grants with Bay City and so on. So that's fine. We have interested partners, and that Oregon Parks and Recreation is mandated to build an Oregon Coast Trail, which just accidentally happens to look a lot like the Salmonberry Trail for about 25 miles or so. And so there is another very interested party. And other interested parties, it starts to thin out as soon as you get outside of the municipalities. And so outside of the cities, they're really looking at Tillamook County, Washington County, and the Department of Forestry. And frankly, all of those partners have full plates already. And so it's sort of a challenge to go to them and say, well, we need to have both money and personnel and time to push this trail project. And so what we're looking to do is actually, with the Salmonberry Trail Foundation, building and opening some of those trail segments ourselves with volunteer labor and other organizations such as Trail Keepers of Oregon and the Oregon Coast Scenic Railway. So that those projects could well take place outside of the model of finding a governmental agency to work with. We aren't successful yet, but it's another avenue that we're trying to push to get something to go happen. So again, that's kind of a philosophical change, and I'd love to hear any feedback or comments on that. But we're trying all the doors.
And these are, again, doors that we're opening to explore.
Yes.
Nothing is happening tomorrow. Nothing's gonna happen, in the next month. But we want folks to be aware that we're opening these doors to have discussions with local partners that aren't the traditional partners, to see if this is there an opportunity for us to do this that works for both parties? And if so, we would bring it back to STIA to discuss even further.
I don't think it's I don't think the trail partners would necessarily always receive the government entities. For example, Tillamook Creamery has a long way down the track there on their trail use agreement. So I think from a STIA perspective, certainly from Park Forestry, we think that's great for a non-government partner as long as they have the wherewithal to pull it off, right? In some ways, that's much better. So, yeah.
Any other comments?
I think
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
comments, discussion that we had last time you guys were here. And that Sam as the player of the Oregon Railroad. Having some samples or examples of how you could build that out within the rail bed itself. Is something that is very interesting and something that Wheeler would be interested in working through, so.
There's a great hand up down there as well.
I just wondered how much of the formula has to do with population. And like in Rockaway, we're talking about doing it through the downtown corridor and along the highway, and that's where people live, and it's more populated. And there are areas where nobody really lives around it, and it seems to me like we do those last. And so I wonder, is that part of the formula? I came to the beginning meetings that we had the first like 5 years and haven't been president, so I don't know exactly what that process is like. But it seems like we have more volunteers to help where we have more people who live there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that there's actually a formula right now. We're pushing any options we can. And sometimes in a relatively populated area, yes, there is, and there's a municipality that can help get government grants and so forth. The flip side is when you're outside of town, there's a lot less regulatory stuff that needs to be dealt with and so on, and maybe actually easier to open that. So the answer is yes, no, in between, and maybe, which is pretty much the answer most of the time on the salmon.
I mean, what's very interesting is just as every human being here in this room right now has a completely unique history. We're made up and we look differently. The trail is exactly the same, and the same for the communities. How Rockaway is so different than Timber, or Buxton is from the city of Tillamook. And that's what Michael was talking about. It's every way in between that you can think of. So really, we're trying to look at every segment of the trail as it is a unique entity and community of people. So there's not exact formula that we found.
I think STIA doesn't want to force it on a community. We want the community to come together to build the trail. And so rather than us having a formula on when to build the trail, really it's when does that community come together and want to build a trail? And we're here to support that with a lease that's ready to go, with trail standards that are ready to make it possible for that community. But really, ways we kind of evolved here is for the community to decide they want a trail, figure out how to do it. And STIA supports that effort. And STF supports it with fundraising expertise and various things, but really we're looking for communities to come together and reach that spot.
And being engaged cooperatively.
Yeah, and be engaged with the community cooperative.
Okay, yep. All right, so let's move on. The next segment that I'd like to talk about is basically the coastal segment here. You can almost see it in blue. It extends from Tillamook up to basically where we are right now, maybe the winery. And that is a chunk of trail that is completely different than other sections. I'm going to look at in the south part of that. We're going to talk about several projects and things that are underway. The first one is that I do want to point out that the Salmonberry rail to trail lease is 82 miles long, and it does extend all the way down to 7th Street in Tillamook. The planning documents, for reasons that I never quite understood because I came here late to the game, stop at the Tillamook Creamery, but the trail, the corridor actually extends beyond that.
That's our destination. Creamery.
I realize that all roads lead to Tillamook, but that's fine.
Ice cream. counter.
Yeah, the ice cream counter. We have two projects that we've worked on recently in this part of it, the Tillamook Creamery Path and the Bay City grant proposal. The Tillamook Creamery Path is a gravel path that would come out of the north end of the creamery on the back side of it, go down the Salmonberry right away for about a quarter of a mile, and then turn and go on, I can't remember the name of the
Latimer
street.
Road.
Latimer Road, thank you. And then loops back into the big parking lots there. And Tillamook Creamery is funding parts of this with the goal of making a trail that their employees can walk on break or whatever, and also tie in with the Salmonberry bigger scheme. So it's kind of a win-win. That project is tied up right now, right down there in the corner. There's a little wetland and it's stuck in the Corps of Engineers wetland determination process, which was dramatically slowed by a whole bunch of Supreme Court rulings recently. And so maybe someday it'll be done and then we can figure out how we can build a trail.
This is gonna be the easy one.
Yeah, this is easy except for one little detail. And we'll see where that goes. But it's one that's active, let's put it that way. The other one that we worked really hard on was a community paths program grant. Community paths program is an ODOT funded grant for building trails like multi-use trails like we're proposing here. And we put together a grant proposal with Bay City for a 2-mile stretch south from Bay City down to Idaville. And unfortunately, we're not successful in getting that funded. The community paths grants are really a transportation grant. They're intended for moving people primarily between neighbors in an urban environment, and it's a bit of a hammer fit for what we're talking about. And so we don't score particularly highly on their scoring system. So that one was unfunded. Moving further north into the north half of it here, there's two areas which there's things going on. The Three Graces problem area, which I'm calling it that. The thing that's going on is the wall fell down and along holding up 101. But nothing else has really happened there, except if you think about this concept of building the minimum trail that's safe. Now you can start to think of maybe a 4-foot wide gravel trail passing through there that maybe uses some of the right of way from the railroad in short segments for particular different things. And so when you do that, you begin to think maybe it's possible to do something in that area. It's a choke point, it's a safety hazard. There's lots of reasons to do that. And I think as we work our way in with a little bit different focus on our glasses, maybe we can make something happen there. I'm very optimistic. Rockaway has a community paths grant that was actually won two cycles ago. It started off as a construction grant. It had to be turned into a refinement grant because there wasn't quite enough money to really build much there. And that's just in the process of rebooting. I think there's the new consultant has been named, Alta contract or planning, whatever it is. And so that will come about. We have this slide here kind of gives a few details about that CPP grant. The city of Rockaway did a lot of public outreach over the last few months, and that's really going to help expedite the engineering once it gets started. The idea is to get finished with the refinement by middle of 2024 so that we can make the next grant cycle to try and get some construction funds for that. This map is almost useless, particularly when you can't see it, but there are some concepts here that I'm interested in pushing a little bit. The first one is at the north end there is a railroad bridge that crosses, can't think of the name of the stream. Crescent Creek, that's correct. And there is not much space there. It's a very difficult thing to imagine building a 10-foot wide trail. You'd need a new bridge and millions of dollars of work. And I think that we should be able to talk about, again, a 4-foot wide gravel trail and then cantilever that off the side of the bridge so there's not a second bridge required. So that's a concept. Again, it's you put that different pair of glasses on and you get a different answer. Another thing that I think is a really cool concept, Oregon Coast Scenic Railway is very interested in making some improvements just north of the public area there, the wayside. And they're interested in a platform that people can climb down from the train on this platform. So they're looking at a 10-foot wide concrete platform. And I say to myself, boy, that looks like a whole heck of a lot like a trail when there isn't a train there. So maybe we can make this a multi-use trail in many different ways. And so that's some of the thinking that we're trying to push on or to come forward with. We have some preliminary discussions going with Wheeler up here, but it was really nothing that I can hang my hat on to put a slide together, so I didn't address that. But are there any questions about what's going on the coastal segment? Yes.
Charles, the mayor of Rockaway Beach. One of the things that's really important to our community, particularly our businesses in our community, from north third to south third, they do preserve parking spaces.
Correct. Yep.
Those are worth about $900 per space in retail and seats for the businesses, and so we end up having to remove spaces that have an impact. We don't have other land that we can put parking in.
Sure.
In reality. So
Yeah. No, I'm
okay. Help us preserve our parking.
Absolutely. We're looking at some concepts that would leave a lot of that in place, or all of it in place. Maybe you can get you a few more and more. Yeah, right on.
More and more.
No promises.
More space.
Yeah.
Mary McGinnis, City Council, Rockaway Beach, and I just want to say thank you to STIA and STIA for all the work, help, and support you've given our city, because we are fairly far along in the process because of the support from you, so thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yeah.
That goes both ways.
Yes. Yes.
They do. Michael, I just want to add to this discussion about Rockaway right here, that, you know, I feel like this segment has progressed considerably, because folks who maybe in the past had not seen through same classes sort of came together to really understand what are the challenges and the goals of the city and small businesses in the city. What are the challenges, the goals of the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad? What are the challenges, the goals of the Sandberry Trail? And is there a way that we can think creatively about the resources that we have and the viewpoints that we have to meet as many needs as possible, and we're really close to getting there. Yeah.
So I would add to that, the Chamber of Commerce downtown in Rockaway leases from the grocery store. We own the depot and the caboose, and we just wrote a grant to do neighbors from the street to the creek. And we'd actually like to do a little pavered walkway around the creek. And we advocate for pavers because they're natural stormwater drainage where we live. And so we did the wayside there in pavers, and I can stand and watch rain pummel that and it rains. And that's, so here where we live, that can be big puddles and standing water. But also, if you do construction by an older home, and there are many along the tracks, it can flood that type of help. If you're not creating drainage when you're working too.
Good
So
point.
we're a little bit different here. That's a big concern for us. And so that's why we wrote around for pavers to do that whole surface. For me, I kind of see that as the heart of the beginning of Rockaway Beach, and we know about that thing here.
Cool. Yeah, good point. I like pavers too. I use them at home all the time.
Is this an opportunity for the public to make comments about coast segment areas, or would you prefer that to the end?
I think that would probably be the end of it, unless it's directly applicable to something that I've already talked about.
Not probably directly outside of the fact that I'm in the segment, because.
All right, well, thanks. I appreciate not getting out of the flow here. So I'd like to move on to the river segment, which is the next segment to the east. And it has also had some unfortunate changes. So what you can't see here is that there are two bridges in the river section which have suffered in recent years. The first one, the lower one, is the Halem Bridge number 2, which is very close to the winery, right at the end of the canyon. That's closed to railroad use right now. And another bridge just north of Nehalem Falls, Fall Creek Bridge, washed out in a big way, and now is also unusable either for a trail or as a train thing. The Oregon Coast Scenic Railway is looking for money to repair both of these. But for the moment, the Tire River section is basically not available for train traffic. And so one of the things that we're in discussion with and thinking about is what does that mean for possibly making trail in this area? And so if you sort of, again, put on your glasses for a rail bed trail, meaning a trail that goes between the rails, between the tracks, that could be used as a train or by a train or as a trail, we now have roughly 20 miles, if you go all the way to Enright, of reasonably easily converted right of way to a trail. It's not, there's nothing easy about it. There's parking requirements and everything else. But relative to the plan document, which required a tremendous amount of earth moving and so forth, this is a lot easier way to potentially move forward. And I'm very excited about this because I would really like to see some trail opened here in Tillamook County and get some recreation and so forth going on this side of the mountain. And I think there's a door that's potentially open. And of course, you might ask the question, well, what happens when the bridges get fixed? And indeed, that is an option, some years from now, it's possible. But I would say that OCSR and STF have a feeling that we can come to an agreement that would allow us to use a trail and a rail on the same chunk of real estate, and we would just have to learn to cohabitate and do it safely. And that would open up a tremendous amount of real estate for us in this area. So again, trying to change that around a little bit. Molar sand and gravel is on this because right now, Oregon Coast Scenic Railway can't bring their train up there to get gravel and riprap and all of the other things necessary to maintain the right of ways. And so that's an area that's very important from a railroad standpoint to be able to access that. So the lower Nehalem Bridge is definitely a priority for getting repaired. And then that's, I think everybody's mutually on board with that. Let's get that fixed so we can get back to getting rock. All right, that's the canyons or the river section. Again, comments or thoughts about this wild and crazy idea?
I think some of the commentary around shared spaces is really important for all of us to kind of digest. We do that now in the many tunnels that are used for bicycling, as an example. 101 through that tunnel and the light system, you can find that all over our state.
Yep.
But I think that there is already an established safety protocol that we could adopt and really think about how that could really help us.
I had never thought of that point, and I appreciate that because you're right. There's more and more of this. If you go down downtown Portland, there's a whole lot of shared streets and paths that everything's just going all over.
We have to get used to it. We have to re-educate our brains.
And
think
it
on
does
how we
work.
look at it.
And sharing space with a train sounds dangerous, but we're also talking about a very slow moving train.
Not
If this
not
was
with the train.
Well, but if this was a 70-mile-an-hour freight track, it isn't going to happen, right? But with the way this train operates, I think there's some opportunity there. Yeah. More questions, thoughts? No? Okay. Let me go on then to the canyon segment, which is the sort of the nut to crack if you want to build a trail that goes from the coast to Portland. There is about a 7-mile section that is heavily damaged. That was from the 2007 storm, and then all the subsequent storms are making it worse. I don't have any good good information there. The identified issues are bridges that are washed away, tunnels are damaged, railroad grade is washed away, and there's landslides and rock slides all over the place. And that's happening more and more. We did just go on a backpacking trip through that, and everything is getting worse, and the trees are growing at a very good rate. So that will be a challenge, but again, it's a challenge that I think if you can start to nibble away at and work on it slowly, you can think about making a trail through that part of the world. And it's going to take some partnerships. It's people like Trail Keepers of Oregon and stuff like that. They're used to building trail in the backcountry. Those are the kind of people we need to talk to, get that going. Yeah, the other thing is that Caroline mentioned that we were able to get some money to do preliminary bridge inspection. The eastern half of this trail has a huge number of very large and very old trestles and bridges. And we were able to get a company to come in and evaluate them, at least at a preliminary stage, to look them over and see if there were obvious structural problems that are going to prevent these being used by the trail. So they worked starting on the east end on banks because we had some that we needed to have detailed, and then they did preliminary, and they checked about 6 bridges here in the canyon section, at the upper end of the canyon section, 7 bridges, I'm sorry. And all of the trails that are, all of the bridges and trestles they looked at are suitable for trail use. And particularly the 2 big steel trestles, there's 2 over Reliance Creek and 1 over Baldwin Creek. These are trestles that are 167 feet above the creek, and they're 800-900 feet long. These are big structures. They looked them over, and they again could not find any serious issues with that. That's extremely valuable from a planning standpoint, because if you had to make a trail that went around that obstacle, it's not going to be easy. As it is, we just go right down the bank. Now, you obviously have to do things to these bridges to make them safe. They're not safe now. You can't, there's no railings on them and that sort of stuff. But at least it's structurally in pretty good shape. Any questions on the canyon site? Still a challenge? Will be a challenge? No? Okay. Let's go to the valley segment, which is the easternmost section. It basically starts at the top of the pass west of Timber and goes down to Buxton. And there are a number of things in process. So I'll just start chewing through those. We had a CPP grant that we wrote for a 3.5 mile chunk or 3.2 mile chunk called the Catalyst Loop. That was supported by Washington County, and that was unfunded. So that was an attempt to find $5 million roughly to build a chunk of trail, and that did not go anywhere. John Vogler is going to talk about this some more. We have been doing a lot of volunteer vegetation clearing, which is just basic preventive maintenance of the right-of-way. Get rid of the trees that are tearing up the tracks and just chopping blackberries and getting rid of other invasive species. Big job, but we've been very successful with it. The other thing that is going to happen starting as early as next week, we are going to have the rails and ties salvaged on a chunk of track starting in Buxton and working north to just north of, I'm sorry, at Banks and working north, just north of Buxton, 7.2 miles. And we can do that because the present pricing for scrap steel and so forth is that there's a net negative or net positive return from having somebody tear up that track. So we're going to have a contractor come in and remove the rails and ties and scrap all of that stuff out. They take their ties and sell portions of them. They take the rest of them to landfills. The rails either get scrapped or get reused as rail for other projects around the country. So what that does is that removes the rails and ties as an impediment to future trail building. It doesn't make a trail because it's not ready for prime time and the bridges aren't safe and so forth, but it's a huge step in the right direction. And rail salvage is something we're looking forward to because that really sort of cleans that area out and makes it available for trail building. It also makes us a little bit of cash, which doesn't hurt. Then I want to tell again about the Salmonberry trussels and bridges and the rail inspection. So if you look out at the rails to trails world in the number of trails, there's probably 1,000 trails that have been built in the United States. We have some of the biggest and the highest density of bridges of any of those trails. It's a marquee feature of what we get to work with. And so the bridge inspection was very important. We had 10 bridges that we tested fully. They came and they checked every single timber on those bridges. And the reason we had to do that is because they're going to be driving the rail salvage equipment over those bridges. And we really don't want that in the creek. So that was a requirement. And then they did 4 more bridges up in the area around Stubb Stewart Park, another whole series of large trestles up there, and did preliminary inspections on those. And the good news is that all of those bridges are also available for trail. There is a 22-foot span and one of the little bridges over Dairy Creek that needs to be replaced. We can get the rail salvage to work, but then we better fix it before we try and do the upgrades for the trail. So, and the other thing that they pointed out is that there's a tremendous amount that we can do for preventive maintenance to keep these wooden trussels from rotting and the steel trussels from rusting. And it's as simple as going in and blowing the leaves and so forth off of all the little nooks and crannies where they gather water and they just make a little petri dish and rot the wood out. So that's an area that we're going to try and start to work with just for preservation purposes, because these bridges are 70 years old. They're venerable. We got to treat them well. Otherwise, they're not going to be around for us, 20 years from now when we want to build our trail. The preliminary again. Oh, I have to say that a couple of these trestles, the bridge inspector was just astounded in how good a shape they are. The trestle that's right along Highway 47, right south of Stubb Stewart Park, that's just to the right as you go up there. They spent 2 hours there. I happened to be there with them, and they couldn't find anything wrong with that bridge on their preliminary inspection. They had nothing to say. They said, let's go look at another bridge because that's what's fine, which is astonishing for a bridge that was built in 1935, right? It's just how that happens. I don't know, but we'll take it. Another thing that we are working with, we have, as part of our technical advisory team, we're making little sub-teams under that to do specific jobs. And one of the things that we're working on is something called a scout team. Nobody really knows what's out there on big chunks of this right of way. Whether the culverts are okay, whether the trees are down, what's going on out there? Nobody's paid attention to this for 20 years. So we have a group of people now who are going out and walking that chunk of trail, noting what the culverts are, finding all the culverts. The Port of Tillamook Bay had something called a bridge book, which identifies where all this stuff is, and we're out there trying to figure out what in the bridge book still exists and whether it's in operational. We don't want to have more washouts, and the way you avoid a washout is you get the culvert to work so it doesn't back up and wash out. Then we can also go back and we're building a database, so you can go into that database and you can see what's out there and what's working and what isn't. So once we get our volunteer program ramped up, we can go out and fix those things. All of this stuff is an attempt to slow the infrastructure decay. This isn't building a trail. This is just preserving the right of way so that it doesn't get any worse than it is today. A valuable thing to do. Another thing that we're working on is right on the west side of the town of Buxton, there's where the Buxton depot used to be. There's a piece of property. We have a right of way is about 140 feet wide there. It really looks like a very nice place and an easy place to build a trailhead. And so we're working through concept drawings of a very rustic, a very rustic style of trailhead. Again, you can't see it. My mental model is the Bay Ocean parking lot out here on the spit west of Tillamook. So we're talking about a gravel pad. We're talking about some used rails that build a barrier around there so people can't go off and drive there, and maybe some portable potties that go with that. As again, just like the trail, what is the minimum we need in order to be able to have a trailhead that's functional? Well, the answer is this is perfectly functional and everybody likes it and it's used extensively. So let's do that.
And trash cans.
And trash cans, yes, trash cans are the other thing. And maybe an information kiosk if we can afford it. So, and then another big project that we're working on is the Washington County land use things. And there's 27 miles of railroad right of way that are in Washington County. And by the way, fun fact, the railroad goes in and out of Washington and Tillamook County 5 times. So it's all broken up in little segments. And that's a big process for us because there's a lot of requirements and we need to work through those requirements and get that cleared out so that we can begin our construction. So I think that ends up my Valley segment update. Any questions or comments?
Where exactly was that?
Trailhead?
Yeah.
Trailhead? It's
Fisher Road,
Fisher Road and
and 47.
East County of the Mill Pond.
It's next to that, right next to the piece that county owns.
Yeah.
On
The-
Fisher Road.
On the south side of Fisher.
no, on the north side of Fisher,
Right.
there's
East County.
well, the right of way is 140 feet wide there, so the first bit is railroad right of way, and then the county owns the pond that's right beside that. So, Yeah,
That's 500 feet long.
yeah, 500 feet north of there and about 140 feet wide is all railroad right of way. So,
That's one of the other, I mean, wherever the trailheads are in Washington County has said, I don't have, records of there being any theft or whatnot near trailheads, but you talk to that immediately go, oh, well, that's where it all is, but it never gets, they never find anything, right? So there's nothing to report. And my mother-in-law owns a piece of property of that up on the state.
oh, really? Okay, all
So
right. Well, this is nowhere near ready for prime time. We're just looking at what it takes to do a minimum there.
yeah, I know, but I mean, I've been here since probably the day one, but I mean,
Yes.
hockey was the one.
Yes.
At that time.
Okay.
And here we are, it's getting closer and closer.
Okay. Other comments, questions, thoughts?
I appreciate that level of overview. That was super helpful for me.
Okay.
So.
Well, I'm starting to understand the topography and all the connections. I know other people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have just another couple of slides here. We wanted to thank, we have a whole bunch of partners on a whole bunch of these projects and we wanted to thank all of them. And we really also have been amazed at the volunteer effort and work that have happened. We had people clearing blackberries in a snowstorm, which is just about the bottom of the barrel as far as I can tell, but they had a good time. And, and it was fun. And so that wraps up my my presentation.
Questions? Sure, we'll get to that as we progress through.
Well, we were
Thank
also
you,
going,
that's super, very.
we were also going to talk about the minimum trail standards.
And I think that would be really helpful because I think that would get to some of the concerns and questions.
Okay.
So that we're kind of all on the same page, because I don't know that I'm opposed to the conversation around minimum, but I think it's really important that we have mutually agreed upon standards. We've talked about it, but it's like we would need to have those mutually agreed upon, and then we have to have agreements, and then how are we going to manage that? How are we going to create that certainty? And who's accountable and responsible when there are issues, then, who do folks go to, and this kind of things would help them solve a lot of the concerns, I think.
So I spent a bunch of time trying to write those minimum standards, and the very first thing that you run into right away is that every single part of this trail has different character. And so as soon as you try to take a big brush to it, it gets very difficult. So I have a proposed minimum trail standards, which also happens to line up with my perception of what stage 1 would be as a minimum safe trail. So it's not going to be an exhaustive document because stage 1 varies as you go. And not only that, it's a very minimum standard. It's the minimum we can get away with, right? To build, not get away with, but that we can use to open a standard or a trail. And so I broke this into 3 different areas because There's the stuff that happens at the coast is significantly different enough that it needs to be talked about. The canyon and river section I sort of lumped together because that's really a rail bed or a trail that's a backcountry trail. And then on the eastern side, a big portion of that can be salvaged, and that results in a different sort of minimum possible trail. And so I broke it out into 3 different sections. And I don't have something that's going to project onto the screen, and I don't know that we made copies for anybody on that.
I don't have any copies.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm not sure how to present this. I don't want to read it. I know that much.
Michael, can you maybe go over the valley segment minimum standards concept wise,
Okay.
and also the coastal minimum
Right,
standards
yes.
concept wise? Because this is not, nobody's gonna come to an agreement today.
No.
This is just the
High level.
initial high level discussion of
Right.
what these minimum trail standards would look like in these 2 areas, the valley and the coast.
Okay.
You're really hoping that this is sort of my agency views sort of straw dog, like it's a good place to start, and we're hoping to get the agencies to look at that and people to look at it together, we can center on what the end product is. This is the very first draft from STF, and hey, this is what we think is a place to start.
Yes.
I think we have, well, I think that, like Aaron would agree.
Yeah. No, and so I'm calling this the east section, which is really the valley section. So the trail type is what I would call a rail to trail, meaning that you're salvaging the rails and ties out of there and then building a trail on what's left, which is the gravel that was there for the ballast. And so the minimum standard is a trail built with existing rail ballast, existing gravel and local materials. So if there's a washout or something like that, you might have to find some material to fill in the gap, and then you work with the gravel that's there to build this trail. Minimum width of 5 feet. That should be actually pretty easy to do, but there are places where there might be some constraints, and so I'm putting a minimum of 5 feet. A decked bridge with handrails. We have to provide the minimum safety on these bridges, and that is not a trivial matter, nor is it cheap. It's going to be difficult to do that. Tunnels with at least a safe passage, meaning that these tunnels that along our right of way have roof rockfall and issues at the portals and so forth. At least we have to create a sub tunnel within that is safe for people to move through, or the entire tunnel has to be made safe, which again costs money. We need to have safe entry and exits from the trail, meaning either a trailhead or at least a place where people can get on and off the trail that meets minimum safety requirements. There's also emergency accesses and points and stuff like that have to be worked out. And we need basic signage, mile markers, trail rules, crossing signs and stuff like that. And there needs to be restrooms.
And trash receptacles.
And trash receptacles, yes, those are together.
It's always about garbage. and poop.
Yes, all right. But I really struggle at this point of defining what that restroom facility needs to look like. It might be just 2 porta potties. And that's just what we have to start with. As time goes along, that would be a prime candidate in my book for improving, because porta potties aren't cheap either. Right? Trash dumpster is clearly an issue, and there's all sorts of issues with running a trash dumpster. So that's really the basic stuff. The trailhead concept applies to all these sections. I want to read it too, because that's really where that comes from. And I'm calling this a rustic trailhead. This is opposed to the parking lot at Banks, which is not a rustic trailhead. It's a full engineered paved trailhead. So we're looking potentially at one at Buxton, which we're calling the Williams Creek Trailhead, one at Cochrane at the top of the pass, where there's a very, very wide section of railroad right of way west of Timber, and maybe one at the confluence of the Salmonberry. These are pie in the sky. I haven't gone far on it, but those, if you're going to have the trail open a significant length, you're going to need to have some access points like that. So, and those are obvious spaces to do. Then we're talking about gravel and rock parking areas, nothing beyond that, some sort of barrier made up of salvaged railroad ties or rails to keep the people from driving elsewhere, stuff like that. Again, safe entry and exit, basic signage, and this is where the restrooms and the trash pickup are actually more likely to be located as at the trailheads.
And then there's, of course, maintenance and monitoring that goes along with any minimum trail standard.
Yes, so there's a whole big long thing here
We have to
on the
maintain.
partnership and this stuff, so.
I wonder how much STIA wants to put standards around that, and how much we rely on that community partner that's like Rockaway, like how much direction does Rockaway want from STIA, and how much are we willing to take Rockaway's proposal to make sure that it meets our.
I look at that as being a negotiated settlement because it's just, there's so many flavors to this trail that I just can't imagine predicting or writing down a specification that would work. I mean, they're just, and especially if you're working in a stage type of environment where you're starting at something minimal. We all have to agree on what the minimum is and we all have to do that. But as soon as you're talking about subsequent ones, well, then you get a whole different discussion about what's possible there, or what is necessary. And everybody has different priorities. So the stage 2 could be that we want to update the restrooms and somebody else wants to do something else, and then we have to work that out. So I really struggled with what to write down. It's one of these, you sit in front of the keyboard, you say, oh, now what? And it's
You
not,
gotta start somewhere.
you gotta start somewhere. So I put this out there. It's a straw person to just start beating up on.
That's what's in our continuous plan, that's why it hasn't been done yet, it's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's
So
not
Michael,
easy.
do you mind just going through briefly the
Oh.
coastal segment?
Yeah, the
minimum
coastal
standards
segment.
As they're currently being autumn.
Okay, the trail type is rail with trail, meaning that the trail is not ordinarily on the tracks. But there will be potentially segments where they're what I call commingled. In other words, up on a bridge, the trail may be tighter to the railroad tracks than would normally be allowed. But for that short chunk of trail, everybody can come to agreement that that's still the right answer, so we can get something to happen. Gravel trail, I'm putting a minimum width of 36 inches on that because there are places where all you have is a berm and the track on top of it. You can't put anything bigger than 3 feet. I have played around in CAD enough to know that 3 feet is all you're going to get on the side of that berm. And even that's not easy. So I put a minimum there of 36 inches. The trail normally would be located on the railroad right of way unless diverted around an obstacle preventing trail construction. So Salmonberry is not enthused about a trail that winds around through streets unless it's to get around a bike path, an obstacle. So we're not opposed to other trails connecting with this trail. That makes perfect sense. But Salmonberry is going to be on the Salmonberry right away. That's our goal. Again, decked bridge with handrail, safe entry and exit, basic signage, restroom facility and trash pickup and trash facility are part of what we know we need to have and leverage or cooperate with other people with have the same facilities, the same problem. Gee, maybe we can upgrade one and everybody's better. That's sort of an approach. Any questions about them?
Knocking that off and run, and I don't know what that about, your girl guys probably know better, but. I mean, some of that seems like it's like 3 inch minus.
Oh, yeah.
3 inch clean rock, you're gonna be twisting ankles.
Yeah, no, well, again, yes, no, in between and maybe. So we went and dug up a bunch of rail ballast and there's sections where there isn't very much of the ballast rock. And most of it's 3/4 minus gravel. And so you maybe just kick the ballast off to the side. I really don't know.
Right now, you walk down.
Yeah.
It's not like smooth spot.
Yes, and a whole bunch of the ties have been filled in either with debris from the trees or gravel or whatever. And so, yes, it ends up being a pretty smooth structure in a lot of cases. So, but again, this piece of trail and you move 10 feet down the line is different than the next piece of trail. It just varies all over the place. Other comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a portion of the coastal trail that you're focusing on next after the Rockaway build?
We really haven't gotten to that point. We really don't. And there's. The communities are quite anxious to work on things with us. And that means that even if all of those community projects were done, there's still big gaps between it. And there's no real plan right now to work on those trails. That might change. That could change quickly. This depends on lots of things.
Funding and
Funding
support.
and support and et cetera. Yes.
Right below Wheeler down here, I'm not sure where, there's a section where the railroad is not on the dike.
Yeah.
You're saying there's room on that dike to put a trail?
Not without doing some earthwork, but I believe that there are some ways that you could build a minimal trail beside it without filling in the estuary. Not a trivial statement. But
We're working with the board, GSL, DU,
yes, sir, all of those people.
PMA.
And the trick is to find a way that doesn't trip everybody's wire and get everybody excited. Yeah. Not easy. Not sure about that one. Other questions? No? Okay. I'm gonna shut up.
It's super helpful. And we appreciate the creativity, right? Because there is no easy, simple answer or solution here. And the idea of being able to work with somebody other than a governmental entity. They're just trying to think about like taking one of those as an example, right? And saying, okay, so here's the minimum standards, knowing that those fluctuate depending on where, within the trail you are. And then who that agreement is with. And then, also then managing the STF and the STIA relationship. And then thinking about, who's accountable for the maintenance, who's accountable for the monitoring, who's accountable for issues that do come up within the community. And so just thinking about each one of those has its own nuances and its own opportunities as well. So, but I do think that is going to be the way to actually eventually get to the place that we need to be and figuring out who has really the authority to step into those relationships and what does that look like from, it's in our strategic plan, but I don't know that we've really contemplated how unique each one of those. The segments are going to be even smaller than the segments we've identified. I think it's.
I mean, even just, from Manning to Stewart State Park, for when that is built, whenever that might be, which includes a trailhead, maybe plus an expanded trailhead at Manning. The discussion is around maintenance. Can state parks, take on managing the toilets, whatever toilets go in and the trash. And then STF with a Friends of group, take on the regular weekly maintenance of walking and monitoring and having relationships with the local landowners. And then there would be a shared responsibility if there was significant maintenance repairs that would need to happen. That's just a guess.
Yeah, no, it's we're closer than we've ever been. Awesome, okay. Well, if there are no other, thank you, Michael, that was a lot, and I know you put a lot of time and energy into that, so thank you for all your efforts there. And I think you lined it up perfectly for John to share with us some of the volunteer. I think we have a superstar volunteer here that we saw pictures and everybody can ask for autographs at the end, but John, do you want to share some of the progress of the volunteers?
Just briefly, I know everybody, you don't want to have the presentation right before break. One of our great assets at the Salmonberry Trail, in addition to having rail bank right away for 82 miles, is our volunteer database. We've got over 1,000 people that have registered with us and said, I'd like to help. And a lot of those people have trail building experience and they want to do the hard work. You can imagine a rail bed after 15 years of neglect, the Scotch broom and the blackberries and the viney stuff. It's just it's a big job, but the volunteers since February have cleared over 9 miles of track, mostly with hand tools, loppers and hedge flippers and just using their hands and hard work. So over 9 miles. So all credit to our volunteer database.
It's not fun work.
I never thought it was possible, and what Michael said earlier wasn't hyperbole about starting. In the snow cutting blackberries, it actually happened, and they stayed 2 hours beyond our quit time. That
Wow.
was remarkable.
That's
There's a lot of down trees, some people think, well, just run a big machine through there, they make, machines that cut weeds, it's not that easy. There's down trees, large trees, 2, 3, 4 feet in diameter. There's thousands of trees that are 2 to 4 inches in diameter that'll stop a mowing machine. Thousands of those we've cut down. So, one thing I've learned about the volunteer effort in clearing that 9 miles, we need to get at it all along the whole 82 miles. We can't wait. So we need to get teams out there all along the way, from the coast all the way back into Washington County. We can't wait 5 years or 10 more years to get to some sections. We need to hit the whole trail now with volunteers. And that's a big difference, I think, from the way we were thinking about it, which was, we'll just clear what we're going to salvage, or we're going to clear what we're going to do next year. No, we need to get out there now and embrace the concept that we have a duty to take care of this railroad right away from end to end. So I would just ask for your help if you can help me organize. Even small teams can get a lot done. I've learned with 2 or 3 people like myself, we can get 500 yards of track done in a day. And if we do that for a month, we can make a lot of progress like we have. So just wanted to highlight or reinforce the point that Michael made. The other part of taking care of the right of way is in addition to the rail bed, we have bridges out there. We need to get those cleaned up. What adds to rot in bridges is vegetation sits on the bridges and stays moist and causes them to rot out. So our bridge inspector actually said this: we need to get out there and maintain those bridges. And in some cases, we can apply some fungicide or other types of chemicals to help add considerable life to the bridges. And there may be some maintenance we can do on the metal bridges too. So all in all, the volunteer track clearing report, I give the whole effort an A+. Since February, major progress has been made, and we just need to keep going. So thanks very much.
To your point, John, for somebody who manages a lot of property in the state of Oregon, you can't wait a season, let alone 9 years. So every season brings its own challenges. So thank you. And thank you for all your volunteer efforts and everybody out there and everybody who's volunteered. I think we're at that point that we have a break. These chairs are not comfortable. So please stand up, move around, get ready to sit back down. These hard seats. Not bad at all. I mean, you really spent time off on the other side, so.
So they
Before I go to you guys. And then. Sorry. Forget. Oh, really? All right, are we all ready to start back up?
Yeah.
Okay, did we lose everyone?
Okay,
Okay, all right.
Erin is in the meeting.
Okay,
Perfect.
perfect.
And she'll just come back when she's able.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started back up. Thanks for, hopefully you guys got up on these hard chairs and stretched a little bit. They're gonna feel hard really quick, I think, after standing up, so we'll do our best to keep going. Caroline, if you could go back over the state work group, you said yours, actually, I don't think we covered that, so if you want
Yeah.
to touch on that for us.
I do.
And that mic will put you on deck, so I'm not blindsiding you with you're on the agenda again. Awesome. I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we talked about earlier is that we with Michael at STF have created the technical advisory team to sort of help us as we come to these challenge spots in looking at doing planning, construction for different segments of the trail. And then we went through the beginning to work on the minimum trail standards and what that might look like for the different trail segments. But of course, then we realized, well, wow, we can't really do anything in our own, alone in our own area. We really need the input of state parks. Of state parks, the input of the STIA members, the STIA members and our additional partners on STIA, such as ODOT. Or perhaps we need to reach out to somebody at the city of Rockaway. But STIA only meets 3 times a year. And this is not a place where we do a deep dive into making decisions or finding out what additional information that we needed. So we identified what we do need to be able to continue to move forward on planning and construction is we need what we're calling a STIA work group. And this is a work group that would meet approximately every 6 weeks. And that somebody would be assigned from state parks. It could be a staff member, or it could be a volunteer leader who knows how to get around state parks, inside state parks, to be able to get the answers that we need quickly. The same with the Department of Forestry, the same with Washington County and Tillamook County, and it could also include certain cities and certain times we're working on the segment that goes around Rockaway or Wheeler. So this would be a work group where Michael and myself and others can really have very frank conversations about the challenges, and let's talk creatively about some of the solutions and what are the other barriers inside government being able to maybe move forward on some of the solutions that we collectively come together with. So that is a basic synopsis of what the work group is. And what this will take from the STIA board members is it will take your effort to find someone in your organization who's willing to sit on the work group with us so that we can continue doing the planning and construction work.
Okay, so are you looking for consensus that we're good with this direction? And if you had been of a name within a 2 week?
Yeah, 2 weeks would be great.
Okay, so thumbs up for.
Which organization do you that from?
State
State Parks, oh yeah.
Or Washington, Tillamook County, ODM, and it's.
5.
Essentially the 5, and then we would invite others in as appropriate.
Okay, good. Okay,
Thank you.
yes, and then we will give Caroline names.
Names in
within
2
the next 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So then let's turn it over the administrative update review of the MOU between STF and CS. I think now maybe. We're looking at each other like.
Mike, Mike's been on a fight fire tonight, just got back from vacation yesterday, so I'll take a stab at setting this up. And then you could clean up my mess, that'd be great. All right. Allison put a lot of work into clarifying the roles and responsibilities of Cemetery Trail Foundation and STIA. As we all know, the original agreement that created STIA had a set of responsibilities and duties. Some of those have migrated over to the Cemetery Trail Foundation because it makes sense for them to be there. So it's different. It's different now than it was 8 years ago when STIA was set up. Allison created this kind of bubble chart, which I know you can't read, but from a distance, at least you can see that the responsibilities of STIA and Cemetery Trail Foundation and Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad and Port of Tillamook Bay, they overlap. It's like a Venn diagram, and there are some natural intersections, and then there are things that belong to one entity, not the other. So it's a work in progress, and I guess what is relevant to report is that we're working on it. We continue to work on it. We hope by the next meeting in January, February, we'll have some concrete ideas to put up in front of the group and to begin to reach closure on the new memorandum of understanding between STIA and STIA. So I know that was pretty broad brush, but that's kind of, I think, where we're at now.
No, I think from my perspective, that has changed over time. I think that's okay, you know, as people come and go and leadership comes and ebbs and flows of resources, have changed at ODF, they've changed the state parks, they've changed SDF, quite frankly. So as that evolves, we're just trying to keep a strong partnership there so that STIA and the agencies and SDF and the communities are all moving in the same place at the same direction. Just trying to go hard to keep those two things tied here. The strategic planning efforts help us in that way. Good, clear rules like Carol or like Al's been working on, you're working on.
Yeah, I think the key thing is we just want to stay aligned. You know, we don't want to get across purposes. We want to know what each other is doing and where they can help, and we want clear field of vision, so to speak, so that we can stay aligned.
It's also important that people come and go. Someone leaves, leaves a hole. It's good if you have to be back up on.
Yeah.
Well, keeping it fluid enough to be able to adjust to phasing and staging and having this dialogue, so that way it's a little more open-ended. So you're looking at the next meeting, being able to have something for us to comment on or comment before and be ready to adopt.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe at least have an initial discussion about.
I think the 2020 evolution within the middle of the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
Leadership changes, Dennis Wiley left.
Yeah.
And some stuff was given to the SPF that is challenging. It's a big lift. Maybe it was too big a lift, there's a reason why we gave it, it's the reason why SPF agreed to it. I think we want to look at that again and make sure that it's the right thing, really, maybe this things to shift around a little bit.
So is that something the STIA work group or smaller group could work together on, so that way you were?
It is absolutely something that the STIA work group would be a part of. Because otherwise it's
gonna take us.
It will take way too much.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally it's okay, we just want to double check it with the new group.
Well, and it just reset to make sure that we have set everybody up for success, right? So if we've given too much one way or the other, and there are gaps, it may not be a funding thing, it may be a capacity or a staffing. Quite actually give us that point, so. Okay. Yeah, awesome. Okay, awesome, thank you. All right, and we've covered the minimum trail standards. Where did the board schedule?
The board schedule, so I think this is back to me.
Yes.
So this date that we're meeting is a different date, and the reason why the date was changed is we wanted to be able to come in part to the coast and have a meeting that was more accessible to the coastal community. We wanted to be in a community that was right next to the trail, which this Wheeler is. Sandberry goes right through Wheeler. And we wanted to be able to add on a field trip. And this morning, the board went to
Cougar Valley.
Cougar Valley.
Yes.
Cougar Valley and also ODS property, the CCC property up along the Sept. So that's why the meeting schedule has changed. Going forward, we wanted to go back to a regular meeting schedule, so I'm gonna suggest a date. You all can see if it would work with your schedules. This goes back to what we had before, which is the third Thursday of the month. So this would be roughly January 18th. And then it would be May 16th. And September 19th. We're looking 3 meetings out. And I have not confirmed this with Commissioner Starr, though I believe it would work for her schedule, because again, it goes back to the schedule that everyone had agreed to before.
Those be.
They are 1 to 4. So the first is the date and the second is the location. So before I came on board, I think primarily with Zoom because of the pandemic. And since January, we have moved the location. We were at ODF in Tillamook. We were then at the Banks Firehouse in Banks. Then we were at the Pittock Mansion for the exhibit there. And now we're in Wheeler. So we could do one of 2 things. We could choose one location and just keep it at one physical location with the opportunity to go to a different place if needed. Or I can send out an email and we can make a decision later.
So pre-pandemic, we tried to hit different portions and communities for the different things. And we kind of paused there for the pandemic, but I think it's super important to get back out. We did it where folks came in to say, oh, and like, yeah, that works, once, but not, getting us out is probably a better alternative.
Well, you try to improve it.
It's okay. I think it's still better to be in the community than what we're talking about, rather, it makes it so much easier for the public to be able to be there and comment and know that we're actually really invested in this, so.
I like the Banks Fire Hall.
Yeah, that was perfect.
I would suggest maybe roughly something all of it available for.
Yeah.
It's just, you let them wait to.
Great.
That way we can see exactly what's going on. Rockaway.
Exactly. See the progress.
Seeing progress here or individual time.
And if we can do optional tours at that time, just to get everyone out there and the excitement, that's good too. We may not always be able to do it.
Okay.
But I think that makes. That'd be.
We could do it in January. That is the next STIA board meeting. It will be January and then May.
January, September.
I would say one of these out in January.
I don't know if we want to pick that.
Let us
day.
know.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that would be great.
And maybe just set
Let
up.
us know which one
Okay.
you wanna do at Rockaway Beach and we'll make it.
Okay,
Happen.
thank
And
you.
maybe you can just send an email to all of us with those proposed Thursdays. The other one I think might be problematic at least on my end, but somebody else can cover it in September. It's always our national conference and our commission
That's
meeting.
right.
So
That's
like
right.
September, there's really not a great,
Okay,
but we can carry on if we need to.
okay.
From the legislature session, it might be nice to have them say,
Yeah.
I want to get some of those legislators to come.
Yeah.
So,
And
and-
it's easier for you. to
Yeah.
go at your meeting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
Same
great.
with Cal,
I'll send
because
that
I'm
out.
sure that's why you have Cal. It's lunch days and we're living at the Capitol this week.
Anytime look better.
It's all right. I mean, I was like, I'll be here today. You never
We're glad you're here.
Okay, if you could set those up for us, that'd be fantastic. Will do. And are there any other agenda items, because we're now to public comment? Unless there's any other board discussion or any questions, comments, things that are not on the agenda that need to be on the agenda. Okay,
Okay, I think we have come up public comment here in the room physically, okay, you may have public comment also online.
and you're good to be able to do that. You want us to do it in the room first, so you're practiced and ready to go with the online? Okay, so we're gonna do our best. Sorry for the folks online. We're gonna do our best to see if we can get you to be able to talk to us. And if not, we may have to figure out how else we can get that submitted to us. But while you're working on that, we have folks in the room for public comment. Okay,
Sir, I just want to make sure with anyone else, I don't want to like capitalize too much of that. I'll go ahead and start, in 1887/86, the Interstate Commerce Act by the federal government was put in place. And at some point in time between that date and 1915, part of the property in existence at the jetty fishery, my resident and our business, was taken without compensation. And it was taken for commerce specifically. We are in the class action lawsuit. We are one of the entities, my mother specifically, and I'm a witness to it, is specifically in that lawsuit because of this said taking. Sometime around 1966, one of the secondary tracks that was also in front of the jetty fishery in the 100-foot surface easement over top of the taking property was removed, and likely the need for 100-foot of surface easement right away was negated. Today, the jetty fishery has been in operation since 1946 and has likely contributed more money back to the revenue on average just for the last 45 years that my mother and my family has been keeping track than the cost that you put up on the board for the trail. And so as a result of what's going on today and the fact that I tried to do things the right way and not just keep building in this area and brought attention to myself, it has now been exposed that not only is 15% of my home in the actual 100-foot surface easement, but it also a portion of my shop and store are also now in there. And so I've, in effect, went from having a viable piece of property that I could sell or could do something with without having to wait for meetings that are quite a far way apart and or challenging to get concrete information on. I have now got to start making decisions. At the age of 50, how much money do I wish to keep pumping into this business to keep it going? In order only to best case scenario as of today, and the court was able to vote on my request to quit claim deed 20 feet of this land on the western boundary back to me, thereby leaving 30 feet to the western side of the track for the trail and any usage of the port, and 50 feet to the eastern side of the track for any use which I currently lease and pay the port for parking today. Again, we've paid that lease for nearly 86 years. The challenge I have is, and I want to do this as gently as possible, but there really is no way to do it gently. As I've been talking to some very kind people this morning from the STIA group, and I've asked them to go back to the port and Mr. Commissioner Bartolang's here and see if they can influence them to change their decision. And the determination was, I had this clear conversation. It seems as if the port is looking to STIA for guidance or permission in a certain fashion. And the conversation was, well, that's kind of uncertain because it's the port that takes the decision. And they most clearly made the decision on my proposal. But they made it, I believe, off of the fact that they do kind of look to you. And I will read this. This is from the STIA group back to the port in regards to a lease transaction I was working on at the beginning of the year.
To allow trail construction on the west side of the tracks, it needs to be understood that any structures, including the ramp currently standing on the private crossing, as well as the structures that encroach into the railroad right of way, the 100 feet, could be subject to modification or removal with suitable notification of the landowner, 30 days in my case, to build a trail. That should already be in the encroachment agreement as it is standard language for our encroachments, and it is. Secondly, from Michael at STF, STIA, in general, for both landowners, STF, STIA needs to be clear that all locations for the trail need to remain options at this time. Whether this is done in a separate letter or somehow made part of the agreements, I do not know. The problem I have is I do see the STIA and the STF as being influential, and I do see you influencing the port's decisions. And if you look at the port's meeting minutes from the last call that we had, you will hear that conversation. You do influence what goes on. You need 30 feet or less from the sounds of it. I need 20 feet. There is 50 feet on the west side of the tracks. The port believes they're retaining this for public use. They believe they're protecting this for public use. Bear in mind, it was taken for commerce, and it was taken in a way that would not be allowed today. So what I am asking is for help from this group to help influence the port with the fact that you don't need the 20 feet that I'm looking for, and that it doesn't serve you a purpose for the public's retention. But the jetty fishery, which easily contributes to our partners, like us or love us, and we definitely make some enemies in the community and some friends. But if we see about 30,000 people a year, human bodies coming to our property, they spend money in all of the businesses around us. We are the public. The only thing this is doing is preventing the public. If I shut, close, or become a nail in the side of the STIA or the port, it does you no good, period, at all. But if you come out and look at my property, as I think Mike, Caroline, and Mr. Bartlett have done, it is helpful to me. 4 of the 5 port commissioners made that decision without actually stepping on my property on that day. And I think this amount of revenue representing to the community, this amount of revenue representing to the history of the jetty fishery is too significant for this type of decision to have been made in that fashion. And as influencers, I do believe it is your obligation to help influence this decision. That would be my public comment.
Thank you.
It's an interesting spot. Way on, right, like the ramp up here.
Flat, level, 30 feet, easy for a trail.
So, to clarify, the port board decided on their own that they're not selling the property. It was along the right of way that decision was made. And it was robust discussion, but that's the decision of the board. So what we're looking at, and the reason being is that we want to preserve the rail line for future railroad coming back, which we all know is not going to happen.
But it's still got it.
So what we're proposing is a 45-year lease to that property with 225 automatic removals on that property, a 95-year lease, which is almost the same selling it, with the caveat in there that if the railroad ever goes back, it would be very back. And that's going to be what's coming before STIA at some point. The STF, well, it's actually the STIA decision. STF heard to STIA, but we're running into more and more and more instances where we need to work with to come together to simplify the plan and come up with a long-range strategy. We just need better guidance, because a 1-year lease on these properties.
I just know.
It's
no
not
certainty.
Because there's no certainty on the thing. And we, if you just look at the property, it's obvious the trail's never.
It's never gonna go there, right?
It's not gonna go there.
And so that's a bad answer for all of us.
It's a bad answer.
Sorry, I'm so
Yeah.
That was the awkward.
Yeah. So, but I, in our opinion, the 95-year lease should take care of the issues, and at that point, and the reason we chose that is because that's when the steel lease comes out.
Right.
And somebody 100 years from now can make the decision.
Yeah,
And that gives certainty for selling the property.
Right.
Else.
well, and investing in business and something makes sense.
I think the problem there is that sounds awesome when you say that out loud. Who wouldn't take that? But I still can't sell without that. I still have to go to a buyer and disclose honestly now, which has never been done in the 80-some year history of our business. You know, my mother aside, I would never sue her. She did not understand what she was doing when she sold it to me fully because this STIA component. We knew about the railroad lease. We knew about that. I knew about that. But the lease is awesome. It is better than the 1-year lease I have today that says 30 days STIA or the port can tell me they want my stuff out and I have to move it out to include tearing down my building. But I want to focus, if at all possible, on the fact that it doesn't actually protect me. For 86 years, we've been paying a lease to someone, Southern Pacific, or the port, for the usage of land that was taken originally without a method that would be allowed today. And an opportunity has arisen for a 20-foot strip to be quitclaimed back, no fee, no cost, no anything. It's necessary no longer according to the own verbiage or the own usage of the trail that I just heard, 30 feet. It's a sloped area, and I in turn can build and operate on my property without having to pay the port for the usage of the property for 90 years. So this does nothing to change the fact that I have to pay for my daughter's bedroom, that I have to pay for the crossing, that I have to pay for the parking, that I have to pay for the 2 shops and stores. And if I want to build a new pole barn, which I permitted, and before building, I asked for permission and never attempted to build it because I was told about this process. Why would I build something else that I'm gonna have to pay for 75 years? And if I want to stop, the lease says I have to take it out. That is fundamentally the reason why I believe there should be endorsement consideration for this 20-foot necessary boundary adjustment, because it doesn't impact the trail and it only improves the public's usage of our property.
Yeah, so you've demonstrated exactly how complex this is, right? It was something that has been inherited before us and will be inherited after us. STIA can't make the decision, but certainly can influence the decision. Getting out there, look at it, better understanding each of these complexities with each of these properties to figure out what is the best alternative. Legally, what can the port do and what can't they do? I mean, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a rail expert. I mean, I would imagine there's things that.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And the process is that it's the port,
Right.
and I mean.
We're
Maybe it's asked that
Right.
those who are members,
Yeah.
they can come look and understand the situation, please do so.
Absolutely. And then I think that, but the harder ones to solve are like yours, right? And if we can get through those, the other ones are easy. I think when we started this process 12 some odd years ago, like there are several hundred leases and all kinds of very different and unusual uncertainties that I think are going to need to be addressed as we move forward with any of these phases or stages of the plan. So I think you have a commitment from STIA to continue to get folks out there and look at it and then influence and figure out how can we partner with the port where it's legally feasible to do so. And that's a great answer for you in today's moment. I don't feel like I am equipped to say, we can certainly do that. But I can tell you that we can certainly continue to work with you to figure out how we can make this.
If I could ask just for one thing, just confirmation that 50 feet is not the minimum trail necessity for the public in that area, so that I can go back to the board and say, we're not maintaining its proposed use. You're maintaining it.
I have a. been on the property, so I don't know if I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do appreciate your usability and your willingness to be here, and we will work with you to figure it out. Other public comments? Yes.
I had one real quick thing, between Buxton and Denver is roughly 13 miles, which is probably like 4 bathroom stops. If you look at it
For me.
For no trail about every 3 miles, so. I mean, not that I want to, I mean. Just like figure that out. Not that I want everybody there, but make it better, instead of worse. The other big thing that we've had some issues with in the neighborhood and whatnot, and that is some of the sparing that is going on, which is once again gonna open it up to where people can walk by and go, oh, the Salmonberry Trail, people are working on it. And I'm sure that everybody knows where that's going, and people are down the trail till they can't, off on our property, trespass, others' properties, me. Portatola Bay had signs up there, they're still kind of there in some places, no trespassing, this is closed. I either highly, if there is not going to be something happening in the very near future, either the clearing should be stopped. Or it needs to be posted.
Heard. Absolutely. No, we've had conversations about posting the no trespassing and whatever we can do to be doing screening and vegetation and things like that to help maintain. Kind of privacy, so.
And so we didn't talk about it in this meeting, but some of the work and planning work that STF is doing right now is looking at a liability policy, and with a liability policy comes a signage policy. And it is specifically so that we can begin to look at paying for signage and getting signage up. And that also comes back to a discussion at STIA between HERPS and ODF and the counties and the port, who's responsible for putting up the signs and maintaining the signs.
I mean, I understand that, you want to heighten it up and get more, locations.
Yeah, but
with all
stay out.
that.
Yeah, and we, go ahead.
Once it's clear, it's spread.
Yeah.
That's the bottom
That's
line.
the problem.
Right.
It's great to have
It's there or not, it's a trail, so we need to make sure that people understand that it's
Yeah.
still not an open.
Still not an open
And
trail.
not to,
A lot of the people that come there go, oh, I'm to the trees, this must be, public property, and don't realize that probably almost everything is private property up till timber. Whether it be, big timber companies or, smaller bottom.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Let's get in a little bit and go back and say that the trail is already built. This year, we had this massive drought and Mr. Squire just declared an emergency water thing for the county. So if this thing is ever built, is there some way that you're going to keep people from going up there on this trail and starting a double forest fire again? How are you going to control that? Is there an answer to that? Well, maybe I'll. So one mob with that, what other trails are there? There's the Little River Trail that goes right down to the Little River Canyon. But fire are significantly worse here, there's a crest trail that has significantly different and worse fire conditions and more remote. And typical honest trail users are not big fire starters. I actually worry a lot more about the riprap use if it's closed and people go by the size. So, from a risk standpoint, I feel that way. The second side on that, we have the fire chief as part of our planning section. He had some insights on signage, and it's very important, find your way in. And we as an agency have a whole series of fire laws we regulate, including closure, is really bad. Including a series of gates to help people out of that country and do the procedure the same thing here. That those super extreme events, we would look at closure, physical closures. That's not to say you could get a fire, but we get all kinds of activities that this be one of many. I think this sounds like a gun argument,
take all the guns away. So that the criminals don't have guns. There's some similarity. I'm very civil. I'm very because the way they work and targets you do it now. That's fine. They're gonna say you have to have people out there patrolling. Well, ask Aaron Starr, that the little bit of trail there by. In downtown, Russell Burgers, what kind of a homeless problem they have in there? Well, what's to stop that from being on the cemetery trail for the entire summer? They're not gonna wanna be there in the winter, they're gonna wanna be there in the summer, and they're gonna say, hey, this is a great place to live up there, it's wonderful. And we're even gonna put some bathrooms in for you.
Kind of, like I mentioned, in some of the other larger trail systems we have, them further remote and away from access and services, but generally not what we see. It's more of what you're describing, it's one of the people who just want to do one that country. And so, yeah.
And that would have been my comment too, is that when you get far from services, you're much less likely to get those people who are experiencing homelessness. They really want to be, and one of the reasons that trail is so heavily utilized by them is that it is right in the middle of town where services are.
You got brand new bathrooms, but nobody uses them, right? Until they have porta potties set up next to a $50,000 bathroom, because otherwise. People are sleeping in the bathrooms.
The bathrooms at the park have been closed for a long time, but they're not brand new. So when we're talking about it. Oh, those. Oh, I don't know if there's a
Porta potties, yeah, why would you need a porta potty next to a brand new bathroom? Like a kite.
But I do think part of maintenance and part of the minimum trail standards is again, the maintenance and the monitoring. So that if something like that was to happen, you have folks that are monitoring the trailway and the right of way who can alert the right individuals and they know who to alert, be able to address the problems. So if you don't have the monitoring to address problems, then you can't address it. You shouldn't have to.
Did I miss somewhere here where you actually got to the point where someone has volunteered to be in charge of the trail? Or that hasn't happened yet? Section by section, right? I call it creamery. To that. We're not talking from here. Up to the river. Oh, no, we don't have that part. And I know you mentioned several times. And ODOT said. And ODOT saying, okay, so the three big players are saying, no, so it happens to be somebody else has to step up. I mean, you talk about bathrooms and trash, but they require almost constant maintenance.
And that's the conversation we were having earlier about could we do smaller segments with different partners to be able to have different agreements that way they're meeting folks. And the reason we're saying not us is we can't commit to have that kind of monitoring and that kind of maintenance.
For the entire trail. But again, so just a little segment from Buxton up to the Williams Creek, what we're calling the Williams Creek Trailhead, which is very small. But still will be quite utilized. The plan that we hope to propose is that Stewart State Park would take on the maintenance of the bathrooms and the trash. And that the Sandberry Trail Foundation and likely the Friends of the Banks for No New Trail will take on regular monitoring, small repairs. And then if there is something large that needs to happen, the two of them would work together to solve it. And in Rockaway, you know, we haven't had the discussions with Rockaway. So I imagine a significant piece of the Sandberry Trail through Rockaway will be like the bathrooms and the trash monitored by the city of Rockaway. And perhaps again, there is a Friends of group in connection with the Sandberry Trail that also helps just regularly monitoring. You know, there are different groups that have Adopt a Mile programs, Solve. So Solve does an Adopt an Area program. Oregon Coast Coalition, Oregon Shores Coalition has Adopt a Mile on the coast. We see the Adopt a Mile on the highways all the time from different groups. So I think there'll be a lot of that for your local monitoring and cleanup and looking for the maintenance, whereas hopefully the government jurisdictions and some of the larger state agencies will help take on bigger such as bathrooms and trash.
We have a comment from Michelle online. Let's see.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Michelle Yank, Adventist Health.
Can you hear us, Michelle?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Oh.
Yeah, Michelle is audible here streaming. It must be something in the room there, so.
Can you guys hear me now? No?
Yeah, I can hear you here online, Michelle.
Okay, but the rest of the room cannot, or?
Yeah,
I
let me check with
apologize for
that.
that, Michelle. I'm not sure why we can't hear you. I'll reach out and see if we can get your question answered.
Oh, and I just wanted to advocate for, from a public health standpoint, for a lot of what's been being talked about today. So no question per se. Just
Okay, yeah, if there's
advocacy.
anybody else online that had questions or comments, feel free to email.
Okay, I will share that with the group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
I had, I guess I comment, further somewhat to what Damien said, that I would ask that going forward, there is a lot of consideration to the people, because in some areas, you know, it's pretty far out from where everybody else is, but there would be a lot of consideration given to people that have been there for a long time, maybe even before this land was taken. And or have buildings or property in the area, and maybe this is more for the port than the Salmonberry Trail, STIA or STIA, I don't know. But you know, if there is this fear that somebody can come in at some point and say, hey, well, we need this 50 feet, or we need a lot of this when we, you know, I know that when you said, well, we need a minimum of 3 feet, that is no promise that it will be that way, or you may need more. I totally get that. But if that whole area isn't needed, that there is some consideration given to those people that have been there for a long time and say, let's try to work something out, because taking that from them, it's already been taken once, but you know, taking people that have invested there for so long would be a difficult thing. And hopefully this, because we're trying to help out the community here, we're protecting the best interest of the public is what is being said. You know, at one point we said we want the community to be involved, but really it feels like, well, we can be involved, but at some point this land, you know, we could deem it best for this use and it's not going to be your use, you know. So I would hope that you guys can bear in mind that there are people, businesses, people, the community there that is going to be greatly affected by this, and as much as possible can be done to try to protect those people.
Absolutely. And it's been a while, and these two actually convened property community conversations around all of those things, and you know, overall that is the goal. We're also seen as also a leaseholder, right? We have that same worry of we're in a lease, and if all of a sudden the railway is going to be rebuilt and take over, the trail goes away and the railroad comes back. So there's equal uncertainty, not nearly as, you know, personal probably as it is to you that has, you know, actual structures or property that's impacted. But I think it's where possible and where legal, we're going to do everything we can to have those kind of conversations and influence the ability to have the trail and everybody figure out how to be the least impacted as possible in the trail through that area. And maybe your property doesn't make sense to put the trail there because it is too slanted, or it doesn't, you know, it doesn't lend itself to becoming a trail. But I think we're gonna have to look at each one of those as we get to these segments and then determine what's the best approach forward. Doesn't give you the assurance you're looking for today, I know that, but it's also not happening today. So keep staying with us. It's gonna be a journey. Other comments?
I have a question, concerning this is my first meeting, so, there's a few one, my activity. Does STF have an operating agreement with the Port of Pleasant Grove?
STF, the foundation, which is the foundation, has a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with STIA. And so the intergovernmental agency. So we do work on behalf of STIA, and STIA has an agreement with the board. So to answer your question, no. STF does not have an agreement with the board.
So if you think about it, like the
3 different entities using the railroad track now, the running.
or more.
Yeah, well, who is going to control that? When, like Jack mentioned, the festival does for free. And the rail riders are going up there. Who's going to control who's walking back down that trestle from the other direction. Then they have to jump over into the creek.
That would be your CSR's responsibility on that.
Yeah.
Holding the piece.
Who's
there.
CSR?
That would be the.
So it gets that conversation about tunnels and other way, right? We're gonna have to figure out what the rules of the trail are and how do we then educate that etiquette and how we're gonna manage those pieces. So think about it like this, like the Port of Tillamook Bay is, they're the ultimate owner of the trail or the rail, right? And then we have, STIA has a lease with them. Oregon Coastal Scenic Railway has a lease with them. And so we're all gonna have to figure out how do we partner with whatever the port is going to allow us to do or not do in those.
While you're not hearing much conversation on Kia, believe me, behind closed doors, there's a lot. I mean, the amount of time I spent emailing Caroline and Michael with stuff this summer back and forth. What does this look like? What are possibilities? What are different options? What will comply with CFRs, what, and all sorts of things. There's a lot of that discussion going on between the railroads and STIA. Yeah.
I have a question. So going forward, I know you guys are leaseholders, so I imagine you have to pay for the lease and then maintenance, there's money raised for the building of the trail. Where would that money come from to maintain the trail, to pay those leases in the long term?
That's the next piece, right? Right now, we're trying to figure out how do we build it, and then we're gonna also have to figure out how do we raise the funds to be able to continue to maintain and support it.
Oh, really? So you're building it, but we don't know where the money is gonna come from to maintain long term? Because it's being built right now, you guys are planning it right now.
Well, I would say it's one of those partnership agreements, like if Rockaway wants to build that section. And their agreement with STIA needs to include their operations maintenance plan.
So if it's outside of that area, for example, you know, the marina where I am is outside of Rockaway. So who would that agreement be with there?
So I think, yeah, the I think it's probably gonna happen is that, you know, Rockaway might do theirs, somebody else will do another section, and then some group, as yet unidentified, wants to do that section you're talking about. They'll have to develop that leadership, that strength, that operations and maintenance, and come together and make a proposal to STIA. We'll give them the minimum standards they have to meet, but that partner agreement, it could never happen. Right, that part you're talking about, it might never happen, or maybe that's 50 years out. Or maybe that's as soon as the two ends are done, some group in the middle wants to clean it up. I don't know when that happens.
So you cannot construct any trail without having a maintenance agreement. Where it identifies who's responsible for maintaining it. And in that agreement, they'll say how they're going to fund that, what it's gonna cost and how they're planning on funding it. So the city of Rockaway, maybe it's coming from their general fund. And they might do additional fundraising around it, but while we're talking about planning, you know, that's what we're talking about, it's just a plan and trying to understand how much things would cost. And what it would look like to maintain certain segments that might be closer, such as the valley segment that I keep talking about between, you know, Buxton and Williams Creek Trailhead, that will likely happen, but no construction will happen there without having a maintenance plan and a partner, and that plan will be approved by this body in one of our quarterly meetings.
That's when I misunderstood before, because on the presentation before, I can't remember this gentleman's name, but he talked about we're not gonna do it in phases. We're gonna do it in stages. And this sounds like phases, because we could do the Rockaway Beach phase, and maybe it's just verbiage.
I think it's
Because we're saying, okay, there's a phase here that the Rockaway Beach phase, that would get finished if they come up with the funding for it and a plan and everything else. They bring it to STIA, STIA said, yes, it fits within the lease with the port says, okay, and then it gets built, and then later on, other sections get built.
And if two sections could happen at the same time.
Sure.
And whether it's phases or stages, and I think that probably just confused things more, right? Like, so the original phases were looking at those segments and saying that they were gonna be built to a design standard, and that design standard is pretty much insurmountable, right? And so I think what Michael was proposing today is there could be ways to reduce the cost and do something at a lighter, but there would still need to be that agreement that somebody was gonna be responsible for developing it, managing it, maintaining it, and funding it over time.
So
it could be a 2 mile stretch, it could be a 1/4 mile stretch of the creamery, it could be through the city, but those little pieces will happen when there's enough community support to be able to do it, because there's not one single owner for the entire 80+ miles.
And you could end up with
Pieces.
set pieces, like 7 miles here, 30 miles there,
Yeah,
with a 2-mile gap or a 40-mile
a
gap.
40-mile gap, a
Yes.
whole valley segment, yeah.
I think that's
Yes.
likely for decades.
For probably the next, yeah.
And each segment again has to meet those minimum trail standards, which includes bathrooms and trash
Signage and
receptacles,
trash.
signage, being how monitoring in and out, monitoring maintenance funding.
First responder access to be able to get in to get somebody if something gets hurt or a fire happens or.
Can I give Michelle one more chance? I think I
Yeah.
figured out the issue. Michelle, if you're still listening, let's see what we can do.
All right, can you hear me now? Doesn't sound good. Are you able to hear me? Hello? Are you?
Okay, well, sorry,
Yes.
Michelle. I will email you
False
right
alarm.
now. We'll get your question and your comment. Sorry about that.
No problem, thanks.
Wait, hang on.
We heard you.
Yeah, right.
Is it your?
Can you try again, Michelle?
Testing. Oh, I hear me. And naturally, my headset's going, battery is going dead, so I'll try to keep it brief. My name is Michelle Yank. I am the Wellbeing Director. Uh-oh. Are you able to hear me? Let's try this. Shoot.
Yes, we heard you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm the Wellbeing Director for Adventist Health Tillamook, and I serve as the Tillamook County Wellness Project Coordinator. It is a population health improvement initiative to measurably improve the health and well-being of all residents of Tillamook County. And this project is a pretty big built environment opportunity to make it easier for people to be physically active in Tillamook County. It's been proven in other places where they have paved trails that are off-road, safe, accessible areas to recreate, that people are more active and healthier in those communities. It's statistically correlated with better health and with lower healthcare costs to society, to taxpayers, for all of the incidental costs that come with higher rates of obesity and chronic disease. So I'm just here to advocate that this is a project that is beneficial to more than just local economics. It's beneficial to public health. I know there are a lot of considerations and a lot of complexity, but these projects have been brought to fruition all over the United States and the world with really positive outcomes. Just having ridden the Banks Trail myself multiple times, I can attest to the fact that it's safe and clean and well managed and maintained. And I know it's a different construct, but it's an example of a winning formula that really does work for communities, and it can be a positive all the way around. So I just wanted to advocate from maybe a different perspective, a different voice at the table, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really hard to hear. So I think what Michelle's saying, she works for a public entity, a public health entity in Tillamook County.
Mhm.
And she's just advocating for the trail, for the livability and the public benefits and having that kind of access for overall health.
And then being audio caption, so her testimony will be recorded.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So I think she just wanted to bring a different voice, knowing that there's a lot of complexities, and I don't think that's lost on anybody in the room, so I just want to make sure that I recognize that I know that we all understand the health benefits and the community well-being, and whether it's a safer route to school or work or riding your bike, or, I mean, all those things are overall important. You wouldn't be sitting in the room if you didn't believe those things are true. Is it complex? Is it got, centuries worth of history with it, with the complexities that we'll have to solve as humans together? Yes, but it's not happening today. We're committed to working with each other to figure out how to get there. So I just appreciate you all being in the room and indulging us and bringing your concerns. The only way we're going to get through it or figure it out is to continue to share what us concerns are, so we can address them together.
If I could just add to that, you may find it hard to believe, but the health benefits associated with a trail like this, by some studies, credible studies, like the state of New York studied the health benefits associated with the Empire State Trail system. The health benefits in the form of reduced cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, just improved wellness. Again, hard to believe, 3 to 1. That's to say there are $3 in health benefits for every dollar spent on the trail. So by that measure, let's get started. Okay.
I listened to the comments about which way maintain it and what the partners and things. And I just want to say that in Rockaway, we are embracing the journey. We need, and our mayor is to be, he's the person for the city, but we are embracing it. I think he will infer with that. We meet, our city council meets and workshops, we have community members meeting, our city staff is on board, and we are fully aware that it's a journey and that tomorrow will not look like yesterday did. And we hope that in the end, knowing that every city has its own coast, has its own path and its own way of doing it, but hopefully what we learn can help support and be a model for the communities that follow us. So we're keeping very close track of what we do, and we embrace it with all of its gnarliness.
We appreciate that, and we're not gonna move forward with anything until we have that, right? Like that's the secret. Is that we've got to have that kind of mutual agreement on support and look for the passion of the trail. So we appreciate that, and we expect to learn all kinds of great stuff from you so we can do the next mile. Before Bill can't do it, because I have committed to him that we are going to do this trail together one way or the other. We might be pushing each other, Mike might be pushing us in wheelchairs, but we're going to do it. Okay, well, I think with that, then we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Sorry.